So I just want to say thank you, all of you, for joining me today. We're going to be doing this awesome PowerPoint and this awesome tasting on terroir. Trying to taste all of our different wines that we have, and really talking about the soils and where they come from and all the different vineyards. I have an awesome guest that will be joining us here, Dr. Scott Burns, who is a local renowned geologist, and he'll be jumping in here a little bit and maybe giving us a little bit about himself, and then also taking us through this tasting along with me here. So, Scott, you want to say a little bit of something?
Sure, and so welcome to everybody, and thanks a lot for taking time for this happy hour. It's happy hour time. I just opened 4 bottles of wine, and we'll be tasting with you in a few seconds. And I love talking about terroir. I've been doing this for the last 30 some years here in the Willamette Valley. I'm a geology professor at Portland State. This is my 51st year of teaching. I retired a couple of years ago, but I still teach one class every spring. I'm a 6th-generation Oregonian. I've been interested in wine ever since college days. I went to Stanford. And this was back in the 60s, and a whole bunch of fraternity brothers and myself would go tasting wine in this fledgling new area called the Napa Valley. Nobody had heard about it. You could do one end to the other end in one day, starting out in Mondavi and Sebastiani in the morning and finish up with Charles Krug and Christian Brothers at the end of the day. And that's where I started sipping wine. Then I started teaching in Switzerland. I taught in Switzerland from 1970 to 75, right in the heart of wine country, a place called the American College of Switzerland. And I made wine with my students in the classes because it was a great way to teach biology and geology and chemistry, all of those things that I was teaching. And so professors have got to write articles. So my first article that I ever wrote was in the Journal of College Science and Teaching in 1976, and it was Science Can Be Fun and Tasty, Winemaking in the Lab. And so I've been interested in doing wines for a long time. Were any of those wines any good? No. But the students got to take a wine home to their parents on the airplane and show them that the $3,000 that they were spending for college education was worth this bottle of wine. And then teaching took me around the world for 20 years, and I came back to Portland State in 1990. So I've been there 31 years. One of my hats that I wear is soil. So I love to study soils. And in 1992, I had a graduate soil course, and every one of the students had to do a report and a field project. And one gal, Dion Starpiece, said, I want to know about soils in vineyards. And so I said, go for it. Nobody knows anything. We went out, and none of the wineries knew anything about their soils. So we put it together. Her project in the class, it developed into a master's thesis, and it started our study of terroir at Portland State. And so we've been doing it ever since. I've had PhD students, master's students do studies. I speak French. I was in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, and so I love terroir, as Jose is pronouncing it. In the United States, we generally put the R on and call it terroir. So that's what I want to talk about today. And back in the early 90s, I started lecturing on the terroir of wine here in the Willamette Valley. We are a cool climate area, and terroir differences in the flavors. So terroir is, I call it the taste of the place. When you taste a wine, there is a distinctive taste that is going to be different from the next bottle, the next bottle, and the next bottle. It's best expressed in cool climate grapes. So red wines, thin-skinned red grapes, Pinot Noir, and then also Rieslings, and then Chardonnays. Now, Californians over oak the Chardonnays, and you can't tell any differences, but here in Oregon, since we're going back to the traditional Burgundian approach, you can. And so I really believe that the best place in the world to taste differences in terroir is the Willamette Valley. And I give a lot of lectures around the world on this. I say, come to the Willamette Valley. Why? Because we have cool climate grapes, number one, and number two, we have different soils, four major soils. One that's not so good, and three that are really, really good ones. And if you have the same winemaker and the same in the same year, and taste the differences from different vineyards and their different soils, that is terroir tasting. And we're going to be doing a little terroir tasting with 2 of our bottles today. So And then, by the way, as we're going along, if you have any questions, just type the questions into the chat box. Crystal will then pass those on. And I just have a couple more words to say about what terroir is. And then if there are any questions, I'll answer those then. And then we're going to get into these 4 bottles of wine. And oh my God, they are so good. And we're going to have a lot of fun. So what are the 8 factors?
There's a lot of food there, and it's going to get a lot more.
Well, somebody, yeah, okay, thanks. So what are the factors that affect terroir? Number 1, the grape. And a Chardonnay is different from a Pinot Gris, which is different from a Cabernet, etc. Here in the Willamette Valley, we have over 20 clones of the Pinot Noir that we have got, and those will affect the flavors of the particular wines. The traditional clones that we have are Pommard and Wädenswil. From the Burgundy area, but now we have the Dijon clones, and normally we just use the numbers 114, 115, 777, etc., like that. Secondly, another factor that will affect the terroir and the flavors of the wine is the geology, and so the rocks that are underneath the soils, they will break down into the soils, and they will liberate 7 macronutrients, 10 micronutrients, and those are essential for the making of really, really good wines. Thirdly, climate is so important. Why do we in Oregon invite most of our friends to come here in July, August, and September? The reason is that it just does not rain. And that's what you want. You want a low humidity area, and you want that temperature to go up in the daytime, down at night, up and down, and that will add to the complexity that you have got. And so climate is so important. We have 4 different types of climates. Greg Jones, the world's greatest wine climatologist, is here in Oregon. He runs the wine program down at Linfield College. And you have cool climate, intermediate warm, warm, and hot. And we are the traditional cool climate area. So the German-style wines that you've got, Rieslings, Gewürztraminer, Müller-Thurgau, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, those are the traditional cool climate grapes. Then you get into intermediate warm. That's like Southern Oregon, Eastern Washington. It's like Bordeaux. You start getting into the heavy reds. And then you have warm areas. That's like the Napa Valley. That is like the Rhone and Portugal and Spain. And then you get into the hot areas like Lodi, California, and those old vine Zinfandel, Southern Portugal, and Australia. So, and most of the Vitis vinifera grapes grow either 35 degrees north or 35 degrees south latitude. So climate, very, very important. 4th characteristic, soil hydrology. Here in the Willamette Valley, we don't irrigate. And so, therefore, you got to have enough, you need to have enough silt and clay in the soil to have water at the end of the season, so they don't go bad. Physiography, elevation, and orientation. You want to have south-facing slopes for your perfect vineyard in the northern hemisphere to maximize the heat units. And then in the Willamette Valley, you want to have everything above 300 feet elevation, because 300 feet and below, you're on the Missoula flood sediments, and you have way too many nutrients that are found in the soil, and therefore you'll grow leaves and stems and not putting the energy into the grapes. You want to stress the grapes to make the best wines. And then you don't want to go above generally 1,200 feet, because the grapes won't ripen. You got to have that 23, 24 bricks, or the amount of sugar at the end of the season, in order to have a good, well-balanced wine. Used to be in the 90s, I would say above 800 feet, but the climate has warmed, and it is going to continue to warm. And what's going to happen is we will then start growing more Tempranillo, and then the cool climate Syrah, which are the next ones that are coming in. All of those things, all those characteristics will affect the soil biota, the fungi, the bacteria, and things like that. Those will give the flavors to the wine. And that is going to be the taste of the place, the characteristic ones. When I think of, for instance, I used to live in New Zealand and teach down there. And Marlborough makes Sauvignon, Marlborough Sound area. All the wineries that are there, they produce, their number one thing is Sauvignon Blanc. Doesn't matter who produces it, they all taste the same. That is terroir. That is the taste of the place, all those factors together. It doesn't matter who the winemaker is. So that is terroir. Now, there are two other factors very, very important. The winemaker is huge, but you want to take the winemaker out of the, when you do terroir tasting, you want to have the winemaker making all of the wines that you're comparing. Winemaker chooses, do you oak it or do you not? If you oak it, do you use French oak or Hungarian oak or Oregon oak? What type of yeast do you use? Do you inoculate it or do you use the native yeast? How long are the skins in contact with the different wines? What bricks do you pick everything at? Do you destem things? All of those things are the winemaker that you choose, and it will really change the style of the wine. And then the vineyard management. Do the grows go north-south? Do they go east and west? What type of trellis do you have on it? Do you use cover crops in between, which we're trying to get everybody to do? Do you have healthy soils? All of those things, all of those are factors that are going to be affecting the characteristics of the soils, of the wines. But those first six that I mentioned, those are what we call terroir. So what we're going to be doing today, two of our wines are the same year, same winemaker, and they are different soils, and that is going to be true terroir tasting. One of the wines is going to be 2016, different year. That's a verdict. If we compared it to the same winery, vineyards, then it would be a vertical that we have got. And then we have the Appellation Cuvee. And that is kind of a blend, and that is the winemaker choosing, I need a little bit of this, to make the flavor that we want. And that is going to be what we call basically characteristic of the valley. So that's the background that I wanted to talk about what terroir is. I will be talking about all of those different factors when we get into each one of the wines. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jose, unless anybody has a question so far. Doesn't look like they have one, right? But
thank you, Scott. One thing that I do want to mention as we keep going with this tasting, feel free to start tasting the wine. We'll get to it here in a little bit, but make sure that you start tasting the wine. You can taste in either order, and then once we get to the wine, you can start tasting that specific wine at that point. We do want, if you happen to have all four bottles open, to kind of revisit one after the other one, and then go back as we're tasting the two different Pinots at the beginning. If you only have a couple open, that's okay as well. But I do want to make sure that you're sipping on something and enjoying wine as we are talking. Let me just show you here a little map that I have. It's just a map of the AVAs here of the Willamette Valley. It's showing you all the different areas that we have within the parent AVA or American Viticulture area that we have. We have some newcomers to the valley that were approved not too long ago. You're actually tasting one of the Pinots from there, the Tualatin Hills sub AVA. So we're going to be tasting our Tualatin Estate Pinot Noir from there. And you have a couple more that are also on there on the map. So just wanted to give you a breakdown of what an American viticulture area is, since we are going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about soils, and we're going to be tackling these wines here in a little bit. So I'll get started with the first wine, and then Scott will go on and talk a little bit about that as well, and then talk a little bit more about the soil. So here's the first wine. The first wine that we want to taste is our 2017 Elton Pinot Noir. This wine has always been my favorite wine, and part of that has to do with just the history of the Elton Vineyard. What I love about the Elton Vineyard is their story. The story of how Betty and Dick O'Brien started this vineyard back in 1983. They actually never made wine. They were just focusing on growing really high quality grapes and selling to other producers in the valley. Now, when they decided to retire and stop growing the grapes, they wanted to lease their vineyard. And we were up in the running to lease this vineyard, but our founder Jim, he actually wanted to buy the vineyard. And Betty and Dick said, no, like you can lease it. We'll make a deal with you, and the deal is that if you want to buy it, you have to wait until we both pass away, and then you can take this vineyard, you can appraise it at full market price, and instead of paying our estate, what we want you to do is write 2 checks. Take one check to the Oregon State Viticulture Program, and give the other check to the Chemeketa Community College Northwest Wine Studies. So I'm a graduate of Chemeketa, and that's, I think, one of the reasons that this wine is so special to me. And I just think that Betty and Dick are just great people, and they do something really great for the industry. So I hope you're tasting this wine. It's also a very delicious wine. I love that color, that ruby color. And then some of the notes you get from this, you get a lot of cherry. And then the tannins, I feel like they're very refined, very silky tannins. So it's a very easy drinking wine. And I'm hoping that you guys all can taste it. I know that Scott was opening the bottles earlier. Have you had a chance to taste this wine, Scott?
I have. And first of all, these are all excellent wines. And Joe Ibrahim, who is the winemaker, is absolutely wonderful. So tell us a little bit about this wine.
Yeah, I just love this wine. I discovered this wine one night. We were actually closing down the tasting room, and I was sitting down enjoying a glass of Elton, which I already liked. And we had a little piece of cheese. It was Brindisi cheese, almost like the salty Parmesan I compare it to. And I had a little piece of this Brindisi cheese, and then had a sip of the wine, and to me, it just totally changed. I think that this vineyard has always produced really high quality grapes, and has always produced really high quality wine. One of my favorite pairings with this wine specifically is salmon or grilled steelhead. I just love to drink it with this wine specifically. I think that one of the things that we have in this vineyard is a lot of wind, a lot of coolness, and that's what I think helps to produce this type of wine that is, it's really bright, high acidity, but also has a lot of notes of like cherry and a little bit of like forest floor. So I quite enjoy it. So let me move on the slide here a little bit, and then we'll have you talk a little bit about the soils here, Scott.
Okay, well, look at those absolutely great soils. Look at how red they are. And so the soil, first of all, the AVA that we have here is the Aola Amity Hills. And so they have mainly two soils, Jory and Nicaea. And I'll talk a little bit about it, but also the term Aola. Aola means wind. And you get that afternoon wind through the Van Duzer corridor that comes down and cools everything down. And so so part of your terroir of the Aola Hills is this wind and the soils. Now, the dominant soil in the whole AVA is the Jory. And it is red, red, red. And these soils are like 14 million years old. They are developed on the Columbia River basalts. These are basalt flows that came all the way across the state of Oregon, came out of the ground where Oregon, Washington, and Idaho come together. And starting 17 million years ago, ending 10 million years ago, but 90% of them came out between 17 and 15 million years ago. A lot of the basalt of these lava flows got into the Columbia River, pushed the water off to the side, and just flowed all the way down to the coast. All the headlands that we have along the Oregon coast, Cascade Head, Tillamook Head, Uquinta Head, all of those are basalt flows that came across. And some of them went south of Mount Hood and formed the Aola Hills, the South Salem Hills, etc. And then the Dundee Hills that you have got. And so it is, and then they've been weathering for 14, 15 million years old. Because they're a basalt, a volcanic rock, they are loaded with iron, and so the iron kind of oxidizes and has this red color. In fact, this is the reddest soil that is found in the state of Oregon. Nicaea is a shallow Jory, so it's exactly the same chemistry, it's just shallower. Ken Wright, one of our best winemakers in the state of Oregon, says, I can always tell when the roots go through the soil and into the bedrock because the complexity increases. And so that adds complexity to the actual one that you've got. And so these soils are highly complex. Secondly, these are old vines. All of these roots have gone down deep, and many of them into the bedrock. And so the complexity in this soil, this vineyard, is going to be really, really good. When I enter a vineyard, when I go wine tasting, the first thing I do is look at the size of the stems. If they are big, it tells you that they are old, the roots go deep, and the complexity in the wine is going to be great. Also, the Jory is our state soil. And so why do we have a state soil? Why do we have a state anything? Why do we have a state tree, a state song, a state rock, a state mineral, a state flower? all of those things. We even have a state nut. We are the only state in the United States to have that. The reason is, and that's for the native Oregonians, that is a filbert. To everybody else, it's a hazelnut, and we are growing tons of those. The reason is every kid in 4th grade in Oregon gets the Oregon Blue Book, and the Oregon Blue Book lists all of the state things. And so every kid in 4th grade gets to know why we are special. And so back in 1990, the Soil Science Society of America said, hey, we need to have a state soil to highlight agriculture in every state. We had 5 official ones at that time. So every one of the state soil science societies decided to choose it. It had to have 2 characteristics. It had to be very distinctive, number 1, and it has to have high acreage. And so I was in the Oregon Soil Science Society. At that time, I was on the committee. Eventually became president. And so we chose the Jory. It's number 4 in acreage in the state of Oregon. Number 1 is the Woodburn, which is the Missoula flood sediments, which is boring, light tan color and nothing exciting. This is red, red, red. And it's old, and it really stresses the grapes. And so we chose that one. And then it took me 12 years to get it through the legislature, starting in 1999. And try and get anything through the legislature is absolutely awful. You have to unite the east side and the west side in the state, which is impossible. And then after the last year, I said, this is one bill that will unite the 2 states, west and east, because the magma came out of the ground in the east and solidified in the west. It's the Jory soil all around the Willamette Valley, and this unites the state. They said, hallelujah, and we passed it, and now we have a state soil. And so it was first described in Dundee. In Dundee, all the soils are Jory and Nicaea, but then the Eola Hills, exactly the same thing. So this, and then also taking a look at the clones that you've got here, you've got Pomard, which is one of the traditional ones, and then you have the Dijon 114, 115, 777. So you've got great clones that are here, and old soils, and so that's defining the terroir that you have here. Back to you, Jose.
We actually have a couple of great.
Thank you. So it looks like we have a couple questions.
All right.
What are some of the key soil minerals that one would look for to develop a premier Pinot Noir?
Well, each one, and so I'm going to talk about other soils as we go through the day. And so this one, iron dominates everything. And whereas some of the others have different ones. And so I had a PhD student that went through, and we analyzed all the soils of all these different AVAs. And by the way, AVA is basically a characterization of terroir. I mean, it's the climate, and it's the soils and the geology and all of this tied together. And so each AVA has different terroirs. And some people love the Jory soils and the volcanic soils. Some people like the marine sediment soils better. And then you have the new area, which the Laurelwood soils, which we'll be talking about coming up. And a lot of people, oh, we love this even better than the other 2. So everybody, and then there's some people like me who like them all. And so they are distinctively different. And that's what we're going to be tasting here. So that's there. So hopefully that answers that question. How about another question, Crystal?
Jared wants to know, how deep does a wine root extend?
Oh, I love it. There are some vineyards that are next to quarries, and these are up in the Amity area, and we saw roots from some of these plants, older plants, 35 feet below, coming out in the sides. And so, especially in the Eola Hills, where you've got a lot of Nicaea soil, those roots get in the cracks, because these are volcanic soils, and so there are lots of cracks and fractures in there. They go deep because there's hunting for water that is down there. So some could go very deep. Great question.
We have one last one from Rosario. She's asking some great questions. How does a wine producer protect the qualities of the natural soil over time?
Well, what happens to protect the soil, one thing we're trying to do is to get everybody to not till the vineyards. No till, because what happens is you keep the microbes in the soil alive all the time. Every time you till, you kill all those microbes, and you have to start all over again every year. But if you don't till, you keep all the microbes there, and then the quality remains high. And so I think that is one area that we really are trying to get everybody to do, no till, and we're slowly doing this. And this is not just in wines, but in all of agriculture. Soil Science Society of America is saying, hey, got to have healthy soils, don't till. Great.
Well, Scott, we've got so many great questions coming in. Tom has a couple of them. Do wineries choose the soil before they decide to plant, or what comes first, choice soil or the variety of grape?
I love it. So the variety of the grape, it really goes back to the climate. And so what you want to do is, so we're dominated by cool climate here. So you got the Pinots, you got the German styles, Chardonnay, and then at the lower elevations, a lot of the wineries are planting Tempranillo and cool climate Syrah because the climate's warming. But now what we're trying to do is we're saying, what is the marriage between the different clones and the varieties and the soils? I mentioned before, you want to stay off of the Missoula flood sediments. They are just nutrient rich. They got too much calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, and phosphorus in it. And so you want low nutrients. The rule of thumb that we have in Oregon, the redder the soil, the better the soil, because it's low nutrients. You're stressing the grapes. And so you want to have old red soils, and the big three soils, the Jory, the Willackenzie, and the Laurelwood, all are red soils. The most red is the Jory, and so you want to have red soils and low nutrient types of soils that you have got.
One thing that I would follow up with is, I think that as we are seeing more and more vineyards come up, I feel like more of this and more people are taking a look more at the soils and the climates that you're looking at, that specific, maybe side of the hill, maybe side of the mountain, where I think, it's really interesting how, years and years ago when they were first starting the industry, I don't think that people were looking at the soil. I think people were first looking at the site, and maybe just they got lucky and you got some wonderful soil and some wonderful sites. One of the things that I always, like to tell people about our vineyard here, the vines that are right behind me, is our Brno block. And one of the things that our founder Jim looked at when he chose this site is there was actually an abandoned plum orchard here, and those trees always struggled to produce plums. They would produce really small, really sweet plums, and that's one of the things that our founder looked at, because he wanted those vines to struggle. It was okay if maybe our vines produced just a little bit less quantity, maybe a little smaller clusters, but he knew that the quality of those grapes was going to be really high, and we're going to be able to make really high quality wine as well.
And just a follow up on that, once we found out that different soils produce different flavors, a lot of wineries say, oh, well, Willackenzie Winery, okay, Bernard Lacroute, who founded this, French, great believer in terroir. He had hats that says soil matters. And he said, but the soil is so important, I'm going to name my winery after my soil. And then eventually people in the Dundee Hills said, Bernard, how do your wines stack up against wines grown on the Jory soil over in the Dundee Hills? And he kept on hearing this, so he bought a vineyard in the Dundee Hills, and so he could then have both of those soils, and same winemaker in true terroir tasting in his tasting room. Now, he sold the winery since that time, but what's happening is a lot of wineries now are buying vineyards in other soils so they can do terroir tasting in their tasting rooms. Or what they do is they trade. Say, I've got this particular soil, I'll trade you a ton of grapes for a ton of your grapes on another soil, and then you make the wines themselves. And we're seeing a lot of that happening. I still remember in the early 1990s, very few people did single vineyard wines. What they did is they took all of their best barrels and all of their vineyards, and then they mixed them together, and that was their primo quality. And then they would have the next quality, then they have the normal stuff. Now what we are doing is we're finding that certain vineyards always have great wines, and those are now single vineyard designates, just like the Elton vineyard that we have here.
One of the fun things before we go on here into the Tualatin estate, and I appreciate everybody who is sipping along. I really like to see that. I see a lot of people are enjoying the wines with meals and food, which is really great to see. The AVAs, we have so many different AVAs across the Willamette Valley because we have all these differences within the terroir, right? One of our goals here at Willamette Valley Vineyards is that currently we have vineyards in Eola, we have vineyards on Tualatin Hills. We also have a vineyard in Dundee, which is our new Brno estate. Some of you who are shareholders might have been there for the groundbreaking, and maybe you pick some of the grapes. And our goal is going to be as a company to own grapes, own vines in each of those AVAs, so that we can really express what Pinot Noir is to all of our customers and all of our shareholders. So that is something that we are definitely working on. Let me introduce here the next wine. It's a 2017 Tualatin Estate Pinot Noir. And as you guys are sipping along, one of the things that we want you guys to do, if you have both of these wines open, is taste the Tualatin now, and maybe go back to the Elton and try to taste the differences, because like Scott is saying, there's really nothing different about these two wines besides where it's grown. They're both single vineyard designates, by our winemaker Joy Brahim. So this is a way that you're really gonna be able to tell the differences in what the soils and the terroir has to offer when it comes to wine. Tualatin Estate is our oldest vineyard that we have. This one was founded in 1973 by the founder Bill Fuller. Later on, it became part of Willamette Valley Vineyards. But one of the things that I love about the wines that come out of Tualatin Estate, and a lot of you know them, the Hannah, the Vintage 45, Tualatin Estate, is that it creates really nice, jammy Pinot Noirs, dark fruit. This is the vineyard that gives us our ripest grapes, if you will. It really should be our coldest and wettest vineyard, but it's actually the opposite. It's our warmest and driest vineyard, which allows for this production of really ripe grapes. And we get a lot of color from the skin because of that, and we get a lot of nice notes when we make the wine. Now, the Tualatin Estate, I see a lot of notes of a lot of earthy notes, a lot of forest floor, but also a lot of dark fruit, black cherry, everything that will make a really good Pinot Noir, a really nice classic Oregon Pinot Noir. We all like this wine. We call it our Thanksgiving wine, our turkey wine. We think that one of the things that it goes really well with is turkey. So if you have any ideas for next year, Tualatin Estate is your Pinot Noir. We also see a lot of spice notes on this wine here. And one of the things that I am particularly excited to learn about here from Scott a little bit is one of the things that I saw when I was taking a walk through this vineyard. We always take field trips through all our vineyards so that we're educated on everything that we have, from Elton to Tualatin Estate to our new vineyard, our Loaiza vineyard in Gaston. I saw a bunch of little, I call them like little round rocks that are just all over the surface of this vineyard. And I came to find out they're pisolites. So he's holding one there in his hand, and I'm really excited to learn from Scott on what pisolites are and how they may affect the wine. All right, Scott, if you want to go ahead and talk to us a little bit about this wine and all of the soils that come from here.
Thank you, Jose. And by the way, the soils in back of you, Jose, are Jory. And so when we had Jim Brno is a good friend, and when the Jory became the state soil, Jim threw a big Jory fest there at the winery, invited me to come down and talk about the state soil, and because you guys have the incredible classic example of that big red soil. So let's go out to, this is just on the other side of Forest Grove. Okay, and Bill Fuller was one of those early guys planting these grapes out there. By the way, The selection of all the clones here are just about the same as the Elton. You got Pommard, and then you've got Dijon 114, 115, 777. The only additional one is a 667. So basically, it is same winemaker, but different soils. And so it really is about 95% laurelwood soil. Now, the laurelwood soil and the Jory soil are very similar. But what has happened around the whole Tualatin Valley, over the last couple 100,000 years, you've had major east winds. And all you have to do is just ask anybody who lives in that area. In the wintertime, you get a lot of very, very big east winds coming down the gorge when they get these high pressure areas in the wintertime. And it blows any dust, any silt out of the floodplains and up into the hills. So you have Laurelwood Mountain, and then this particular vineyard is at the west end, and then all the way around to Helvetia on the north side. All of those vineyards for the last couple 100,000 years have been getting a lot of this windblown silt in the wintertime. And that's what we call loess, L-O-E-S-S. But then what happens is it gets washed into the soil, and then it weathers in the soil. Now, the West Hills of Portland, you've got up to 100 feet thick of this loess. Now, that is not good soil to grow grapes in, because it's just like the valley bottom. It's just like the Missoula flood sediments that you've got, high nutrients. And it does not stress the grapes. They grow leaves and stems and leaves and stems. But the laurelwood soil, what happens is that loess weathers into these little piezolites, these little iron magnesium silicate concretions. The old farmers have called it shot soil. It's just like BBs. And there are varying sizes of them. I got some little tiny ones that are in front of me that are just really tiny. But it's a red soil, but you have all of these piezolites that are in that. And it adds a completely different flavor to the wine. And Lisa Ponzi of Ponzi Vineyards has known this for many, many years, and she's on Chehalem Mountain. She led the charge to have a new AVA based on the laurelwood soil. I think that the whole AVA should have wrapped all the way around the Tualatin Valley and included the Tualatin Hills. It was a little political there. And so you've got two new AVAs with the same soil, the laurelwood. And so this is in the Tualatin Hills one that you have there. But they all have the same soils. But they've got this windblown silt, but it's weathered. It's weathered into this. And how did we come up with that idea? Well, I taught in Louisiana for 8 years. You have windblown silt, loess soils down there, but the old ones all have piezolites in them. They've weathered to that. And I came up here and said, oh, this is weathered loess. And so that's why they look like they're formed in a stream, but no, they are a soil forming factor. And so this vineyard is different from the Elton one in that it's got the piezolites. And you've got different flavors, but these are both old vines. They are very, very complex. When you swirl those wines around and compare them, they're different flavors that you get every time, and I love it. So old, complex wines, but one is the laurelwood soil, the other one is primarily Jory, and then with the Nicaea. So that's my take on this one.
Scott, we have another great question from Tom.
Yeah.
And he's asking about, are the grafting of the grapes to the same stock, does that affect the grape?
Yeah, I mean, so all of our grapes that we have in the Willamette Valley, almost all of them, are grafted onto American rootstock. The reason is we had phylloxera here. Phylloxera wiped out most of the wine industry in Europe back at the beginning of the 1900s. And then here in Oregon, all of our original wineries that we had just did not graft onto American rootstocks, and many of those have been wiped out. There are a couple that are still around. And so what you want to do is have the right rootstock for the soils. And that is a specialty that's not mine. But the actual flavors come from what is above the grafting on there mostly, and so therefore, almost all of our grapes are grafted on. And you know, interesting thing happened in the early '90s. The German style, everybody had German style wines. Nobody was buying them, and they were getting $6 a bottle for Rieslings, Gewürztraminers, Müller Thurgaus, but they're getting $14, $15 for Pinot Gris. So everybody beavered off all of those vines, and they grafted on Pinot Gris. They got rid of the Rieslings, Gewürztraminer, Müller Thurgaus, many of them, and they're getting a lot more money. And so you can just graft them on, and then the rootstock still does the same thing, but the upper part determines what grape it's going to be. So hopefully that answers that question. Any other, Ashley, Crystal, any other questions?
Not at this time. I think
Doesn't
small so far.
Great.
let me also take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about a couple things that are going on at the winery. First of all, I do want to mention that at Elton Vineyard, we actually do still have some of the original vines that are planted in their own rootstock. So that's something that, you know, does come with all vines, and something that we do have at Elton. Going back to that question, as far as does the rootstock affect the grape, or really what I get from that is, does it affect the flavor, right? So not so much the rootstock, but also, but actually the clone, like Scott said, that goes on top. The part that is going to bear the fruit will change the flavor, if you will, of the grape. Even though it can all still be Pinot Noir, it could be, it has different characteristics based on the clone, whether it be Pomar, Wädenswil, or the mini Dijon clones. And one of the really awesome things that we have here at the estate, or that we're working on, and especially for those of you who are local, and those of you who are thinking of visiting the winery, is we are working on a new system. It's going to be a blending system that is, it's really, really cool. What we have is we actually have, just think about having like 6 or 7 different barrels on this machine that you're going to be able to come in and kind of play winemaker for a couple hours. You're going to be able to choose from about 6 different clones of Pinot Noir. And then you're going to be able to like try them individually or try them together and see how they work. So we're actually working on this whole blending system, and it's all going to be Pinot, but it's going to be different clones of Pinot Noir that have been made into wine that you're going to be able to play around with. So we're working that. Look out for that here in the next month and a half or so. And then we can have you guys at the winery to try that as well. Okay, so I'm really excited about this next wine that we're going to try. This is going to be our 2016 McMinnville Pinot Noir. I'm really excited about this wine because, you know, we always talk about wine aging and wine changing. One of the things that I've noticed about the McMinnville Pinot Noir is there's a big hype around here right now. You know, for everybody who is visiting and all of our customers who are calling us about wine, the McMinnville Pinot Noir, in my opinion, is our best tasting Pinot right now. And what I mean by that is it's really what I think is it's right at its peak of drinkability. It is a wine that, because of where it's grown, it tends to be of a bolder Pinot Noir, a lot darker colors, a lot more intense flavor and aromas. And one of the things that I've noticed, and this is thanks to a customer that actually emailed me letting me know how good it was, is I went back, I tasted this wine, and it's so balanced right now. Everything has really merged together where it's such a delicate Pinot Noir and it's tasting so delicious right now. And one of the cool things that we have done here at Willamette Valley Vineyards over the years is we've always had different series. And one of the series that we've had is our AVA series. So we have made in the past a Pinot Noir out of each of the different sub-AVAs of the Willamette, including, you know, McMinnville, like you have here, Dundee, Ribbon Ridge, Chehalens. The Elton is the one from Eola. So we have always done this series. And we actually, the 2017 vintage of these wines are the last ones that we're going to have. That's when the series stopped. So this 2016 McMinnville here, like I said, it's tasting so delicious right now. And you see on the notes here, you have a lot of those aromas and taste of dark fruit like blackberry. but then you also have notes of like forest floor and cigar box, things that are pretty bold. But being at 16, it's been in the bottle for 5 years. It's really kind of uh, um, like everything has come together to become more balanced, a little bit lighter, and it's just a really good Pinot Noir that we have right now. So if you want something that you want to buy and you want to buy it at its peak of its drinkability and enjoy it right away, this would be my recommendation from what we have. Everything else is delicious right now as well, but as you age it in the bottle, it'll become that much better. So um, we'll talk a little bit about this wine here. We do get the grapes from Dupee Vineyard, which is it's not our vineyard. It's one of our local partners that we have, and that's what we had to do to make this AVA series. We have some of our local partners that we buy grapes from, and you'll see in the next wine in the Appellation Cuvee some of the other partners that we use. For example, Laurel, who gives us some really high quality grapes as well. So we'll talk a little bit about the soils of this specific site as well. All right, take it away, Scott.
I love this wine. Wow. Now, interesting, out in the McMinnville AVA, it is an AVA that does not have all the same soils. And it's a hodgepodge. It's a mixture. And so I was working with them to help them define, what their AVA. And I said, you can't. But you've got some interesting ones. First of all, they have some areas where the Joy soil is out there, but it's uplifted seafloor. It's 45 million year old basalt, not 15 million year old, but not in this one. This is primarily Willackenzie soil, and that means it's uplifted marine sediments. And so the bedrock that is below it is primarily sandstone and shale. It's uplifted ocean bottom just off of the coast of Oregon 30, 40 million years ago, has uplifted, and then it's weathered in place. Traditionally, the Willackenzie soils in Yamhill County, Yamhill AVA, primarily is Willackenzie or marine sediment type of soils. And with the Pinot Noirs, their Pinot Noirs are darker colors. I mean, the color is coming from the soil. And then you get the darker fruits that you have got. You get the dark cherries, the blackberries, the blueberries, and things like this. And so this is what we are here. The other two that we have dealt with are volcanic soils, one with volcanic soils with pisolites. Here we are into marine sediments. So major shift here into marine sediments. And I think that is very, very important in this particular one here. Also, the Willackenzie soils tend to be shallower. And so therefore the roots have a tendency to get through the marine sediments and into the sediments, through the soils and into the sediments a little bit easier. So I think that this is wonderful. And Jose, congratulations to you guys putting out this AVA series, because AVA series is terroir tasting. You are saying, hey, these are different bedrocks. These are different soils. And one of the things, for those of you who are out there, look on the back of your bottle. This it makes my heart throb to see all the technical notes. And it tells you all of the soils that are there. It tells you what are the clones that are there, when it was picked, what is the oak, all of these. But the important thing is they tell you what soil is there. And it will tell you something about the wine before you sip it. So wonderful soil. And any questions so far?
What does a Pinot Noir winemaker have to do differently than, say, a winemaker that is working with other varietals? And if I can, let me jump in there and say a couple of things. So I think there's always things that you're going to be doing differently when it comes to the different varietals and the cellar per se. When you're talking about, what type of oak to use, what level, like do we use more neutral, do we use more new oak? But I think one of the big differences that you have to worry about when you're specifically, let's say, working with Pinot Noir, especially here in the Valley, is Pinot Noir is a very delicate varietal. And that's why we're always, we're picking by hand. Also, one of the struggles that sometimes winemakers have is when it comes to the weather. because we're always worried, what weather we're going to have when it comes to the picking season. So depending on when it rains, if it's going to dry fast, if it's not, I think that's really what you gotta time your picking and time it in a way that you're going to be picking the grapes when they're their best quality. So I think hopefully I've answered part of that question as well. I'm not sure if you have anything to add on that.
The winemaker, it's going to make different choices depending upon heavy red versus light red, which is Pinot Noir. Right. And so I can't really talk to that because I'm not a winemaker. But one thing that happens when you buy a piece of property, and you say, I'm going to put grapes here, what you want to do is get somebody to come out and do a soil survey. That is, do the whole property and see how the soil variability is there. And a guy named Andy Gallagher with Red Hill Soils is the primary guy who does this up and down the valley. And he says, over here you have deep soil, shallow soil, but over here you have a Jory. Over here you have a Willackenzie. Over here you have something else. Alexandra is a winery that is on the backside of, it's a vineyard on the backside of the Dundee Hills. And you've got basalt underneath it, but you also you're right at the boundary with the marine sediments. And so they have 45 different picking units in there based on clone and soils that are there. And so the winemaker makes 45 different Pinots, and then he blends them afterwards. And so this is very important to do before you start doing all of your wine tasting. So I'll leave it at that.
We also have a couple other questions about the lifespan of a vine and what it looks like from seedling to the point that it's good for production. And one of the things that I want to mention about this is usually I would say it's about 5 to 6 years. And this also depends on where you're at. I had the chance to travel down to Southern Oregon when I was preparing for a different tasting, actually for one of our pairings dinner here. And I was down in the Rogue Valley. I was visiting the vineyards where we get our grapes for our Griffin Creek label. And one of the things that I noticed in the vineyard is that they had these vines that were pretty small, but I would say about like a 50-cent quarter in thickness when it comes to the vine thickness. And I asked the people that were working that were actually picking that day. It's like, how old are these vines? And he told me that they were 2.5 years. So that's a really young vine that we're actually already going to get the first harvest from. And that's not typical from what I've seen here in the Willamette Valley.
I promise.
I feel like in the Willamette Valley, it takes a lot longer for the vine.
I told you this part is tedious.
But good enough for harvesting. For example, for those of you who have visited the vineyard here at the estate in Turner, the parking lot that we have behind our tasting room, you'll see this little block of vines that is between the parking lot and Jim's house. That's all Pinot Noir. It was planted in 2013, and right now we're in 2021. We still haven't harvested those vines, and they're still quite small. So I think it also has to do on the site and in the region where they come from. So anything you want to add, Scott?
Many of you are probably familiar with Charles Shaw wine, Two Buck Chuck. And all of those grapes are coming from the Napa Valley, but they're all vines that are between 3 and 10 years old, because between 3 and 10 years old, not much complexity, and they don't oak them, and so they just produce them in big, huge stainless steel vats. But once you get to that 10-year period of time, then you start getting more complexity. So so there is a cycle that you go through with time that is on that. Also, Jay Ham also had a question up here. Do soils become depleted over the years? They do, but not in the vineyards, because again, as they get depleted, they put more stresses on the grapes, and that's what you want to do. You don't want an overly nutrient-rich soil to begin with, and so it's not a big problem. Growing grapes is completely different than growing your garden. You don't fertilize. You want to have those grapes stressed as much as possible.
We also had a question from Bruce. Hi, Bruce. I see you there on the screen. I don't think I've ever met you in person, but finally get to see your face. We're talking about the McMinnville Pinot Noir. So you're asking if it's at its best tasting now. And that's what I think. I think that it's at its peak drinkability right now. If you actually look in the back of the bottle, it'll give you what the winemaker recommendation is for peak drinkability. And on that McMinnville, it'll probably say something between like 2017, 2018 to like 2023, 2024. And like wine, it becomes better and better up to a certain point, and then it goes the other way. So you always want to try to have a wine at its peak drinkability. And just based on tasting this wine for the last 4 years that I've worked here, because I started in 2017, this is a time where I think is at its best. So I do think it's at its peak drinkability right now. Okay, it looks like we are good on questions. We'll follow up here on the wine as well, but one more thing that I want to add is on the lifespan of vines. We're looking at our Brno estate right behind us, and one of the things is that as the vine becomes older and older and older, like Scott said, complexity increases. And one of the things that you will also see, especially as the vine becomes really old, is you'll see a decrease on how many clusters or how big the clusters are as far as the production goes. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because I would rather much have less grapes if the quality was not much higher, so that we have a higher quality product at the end. We have our 2018 Appellation Cuvee. And I actually put this picture up because this is one of the vineyards that we get the grapes for this wine here. This is our Brno estate. A lot of you who are, shareholders, owners of ours, some of you invested in this project here. And this is going to be the new building that we have in Dundee that is going to specialize in sparkling wine. But we do have a lot of great Pinot Noir vines there that are producing grapes. So this is one of the vineyards that we get from there. And this is a cuvee. So this is going to be a blend. It is all Pinot Noir, but it is a blend of different clones and specifically different vineyards and different sub-AVAs. So we'll talk a little bit about here. One of the things that I really like about this wine is it's a wine that is more approachable earlier. I feel like when the winemaker makes a blend, one of the reasons that he's making a blend is he is really playing with, these different barrels, these different AVAs in order to really craft something that is really balanced. And you get a little bit of the best from this barrel and a little bit from that clone and a little bit from this AVA. So this is a wine that I think will be very approachable, even now that it's at a young age. And you have a lot of lighter fruit, a lot of cherry. I do feel like it has a little bit of strawberry. And it does have nice silky tannins as well. So it's a really light, approachable wine. And it is going to be, like I said, a blend of 4 different sub-AVAs of the Willamette Valley that we'll show you here. And we'll talk a little bit about the soils and how a blend may be affected by the AVAs that it comes from.
Jose, we had a great question from Rebecca regarding peak drinkabilities in Pinot Noirs. Are they all about 8-ish years, and do other varieties have similar timelines?
Sure. So what I would have to say about that, and we'll see what Scott has to add as well, is I would say that a lot of them are about that time period, at least a lot of the ones that we craft, give or take a couple of years. And it has to do with a lot of different things. It has to do where the grapes come from. It has to do with the year. Is it a cooler year? Is it a year that it was warmer and maybe we have a bolder Pinot Noir? So it has to do with a lot of things, and also the winemaker and his style. And I would say different varietals are definitely very different. Where Pinot Noir, we have a light, delicate wine that is something that you're gonna drink earlier than, let's say, a Cab or a Zinfandel that have a really long lifespan as far as how long you can age them. When you're talking about a Cab, you're talking about more robust tannins, and one of the things of why you age wine is over the years those tannins will become softer and they will clump together and it becomes smoother and allows some of the other characteristics to really come through. So in big, bold reds, fuller bodied reds, those will age for longer. But that also has to do with maybe the region or the winemaker and that specific varietal. So what do you think, Scott?
I totally agree. With this particular drinkability, white wines, generally after a few years it goes down like this, but I have a Pinot Gris from a local winery. It's a 2014, and I thought, oh, this is not going to be good. Oh, my God, it just knocked my socks off, and it actually got better, and the color was unbelievable. So sometimes white wines get better. Chardonnays will have the ability to do that, but most of your other white wines don't. So there is an age on it. Pinot Noir is not great, not huge like the Cabs, Merlots, and Syrahs, the big heavy reds that you have got. So yes, and they on the back of their bottles it has primo drinkability time that you've got there. So that's good.
Yeah. Here's actually all the vineyards that we are sourcing our grapes from. The Dupee Vineyard in the McMinnville AVA. We have Lazy River Vineyards in Yamo Carlton. We have Ribbon Ridge Vineyard in Ribbon Ridge, and then also Laurel Vineyard in Chehalem, and then our Brno Estate over in Dundee. And then we have all the different soils that are included in those AVAs as well.
Yeah, and so this is primarily, it is not terroir tasting, because this is the blend of the making of the winemaker, and he or she, when they put this together, they are saying, do I use 5% of this, 10% of this, and they know how to put these together. So this is a crafted wine. I love it because it is the winemaker's specialty that they are doing there. And the Dupee, we dealt with this. That was a Willackenzie. The Lazy River one, that is a Jory soil. The Ribbon Ridge, that is also a Willackenzie soil. A Laurel is a Laurelwood soil, and the Brno Estate is a Jory soil. So you've got all of the different types of soils that are mixed in and then put together. I think it's a lovely, drinkable one. It is kind of an averaging of a whole Willamette Valley, showcasing the Willamette Valley, especially the northern end of the Willamette Valley, and it's a very drinkable, lovely wine.
I have to agree. I think it's very approachable at this point, and I think it'll just continue to get better. One of the things is, if you have any other questions, feel free to send them in now so we can answer those questions before the end of the presentation here. I do want to say a couple other things. I've actually sent all of you a list of wines of the ones that you've tasted, but also some of the other sub-AVA wines that we still have, like the Dundee, the Chehalem Mountains, and the Yamo Carlton, just in case you want to visit any of those and actually maybe look at them and do a virtual tasting with them and compare them between each other. So we do still have a few of those. Some of the other ones, like the Ribbon Ridge, were actually completely sold out. So those would be a good opportunity to enjoy any of those AVA wines if you like for example the McMinnville that is tasting so delicious, or if you want to get some McMinnville before you sell out. We still do have some cases left, but everybody is turning on to what a delicious wine the McMinnville is. One of the things that is new to our tasting room as well is we actually just got some really cool new polos, WVP polos. So on that list that I sent you, you're gonna be able to order from there. And for those of you who are ordering, any 4 bottles of what I included on there will be complimentary shipping to anywhere within the continental United States. So let me know if you're interested, and then what I'll do is, for the people who do send in an order, I will actually take all of your names, put them in a little bucket, and then pull out the winner of that drawing and see who gets the polo that I will then include in your shipment. So feel free to shoot me an email. You should have that based on the order form that I sent you. Let me know if you have any questions, either on the wines that you might be ordering, or any follow-up questions on our presentation today, or any questions for Scott that I can go ahead and relay to him as well, and we can answer those for you. So before I let you guys go, do you guys have any other questions for us? And then do you have any closing statements, Scott?
Yeah, I've just got a couple of closing statements that I wanted to mention. First of all, be sure to try some of the Willamette Valley Vineyard Griffin Creek label. They are from down in the Rogue Valley. I got a chance to visit every one of the vineyards in Southern Oregon, and they are good. And so if you like heavier reds and Viogniers, really, really good stuff down there. Also, my aim in life is to get everybody, when they go into a tasting room here in Oregon, to ask 3 basic questions. Number 1, what is the year on that particular wine? What is the soil? And what are the clones, especially for the Pinot Noirs? Because those all are part of the story that is behind it. And the years are very, very important, but we've changed our opinion on some of these. Used to be, I still remember 1997 was an El Nino year. It was so wet, it was crappy. The wines were awful. And over at Rex Hill Winery, the winemaker that was there had like 10,000 gallons of just absolutely awful Pinot Noir. And the owner said, "You sell this." And so she had her son draw a label. She called it Vino del Nino. And it was first grader drew stick figures with colorful balloons, and that was on the label. And a lot of people buy wines based on the labels, and it sold out. And the owner came back to her and said, "Hey, would you repeat that?" She said, "No, I just saved you from throwing out all this crappy wine." She sold it for $6 a bottle. And then 2007 came, and it was another El Nino, another wet year. And we said, "Oh no, this is going to be bad." And then 4 years later, we had another wet and cold year, and we said, "Oh, 2011 is going to be bad." What we found is a lot of those wines didn't sell very well. Very, very thin wines. But aged in the cellars for 5 or 6 years, they turned out incredibly good. And now some of the most expensive wines that you can get out there are 2007 and 2011s because they are so elegant and so good. And so we learned that even in a bad year, it can come out good in the end. So be sure to ask those 3 big questions. Thank you to all of you for being here. A big shout out to Craig Buskell, who is here. He's a fellow soil scientist who now lives down in McMinnville. And then John Platt, a winemaker, and makes absolutely great wines out there in Helvetia. John, good to see you. And thank you to all of you for being on here today. And Jose, thank you for the invitation to join, talk a little bit about terroir.
Thank you for joining us, Scott. I appreciate your help with this. I love the knowledge that you have to offer. So hopefully we get to do another one of these ones in the future. One thing that I want to follow on before I let all of you go is you talked about Griffin Creek. And, you know, whenever I have the chance to shout out our winemaker and also our viticulture department is, when I went down to Southern Oregon and I talked to Michael Moore. Michael Moore is let's say the owner of the vineyards that we get our Griffin Creek from. He's the son of the owner. So he's handling everything when it comes to Griffin Creek grapes. And they sell us the grapes. We make the wine here on site. And, you know, I'm always going to say our winemaker's great because he is. But when you get to hear it from somebody who is, you know, somebody outside the company, and what he told me is that since 2016, since the wines that Joe Ibrahim started making, that those have been the best wines to come out of his vineyards since they have been selling grapes to us. So if you do guys enjoy those big reds, we also have those from the Griffin Creek label for you guys to try. Other than that, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Crystal, for assisting me as well. And you guys all have a good night.